Let us now look at the last case in which this word embrymaomai is used in the story of our Lord. That form of it, at least, which we have down here. For surely they have a fuller gospel in the Father's house, and without spot of blunder in it. Let us so use that we have, that we be allowed at length to look within the leaves of the other. In the authorized version of the Gospel of John, the 11th chapter, the 33rd verse, we have the words, "When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews also weeping which came with her, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled." According to the margin of the Revised Version, he was moved with indignation in the spirit and troubled himself. Also in the 38th verse we read, according to the margin of the Revised Version, Jesus, therefore, again being moved with indignation in himself, cometh to the tomb. Indignation? Anger at the very tomb? In the presence of hearts torn by the loss of a brother 4 days dead, whom also he loved? Yes, verily, friends, such indignation, such anger as, at such a time, in such a place, it was eternally right the heart of Jesus should be moved withal. I can hardly doubt that he is in like manner moved by what he sees now at the deathbeds and graves of not a few who are not his enemies, and yet in the presence of death seem no better than pagans. What have such gained by being the Christians they say they are? They fix their eyes on a grisly phantasm they call death, and never lift them to the radiant Christ standing by bed or grave. For them, Christ has not conquered death. Thou art our King, O death. To thee we groan. They would shudder at the thought of saying so in words. They say it in the bitterness of their tears, in their eyes of despair, in their black garments, in their instant retreat from the light of day to burrow in the bosom of darkness. What? Would you have us not weep? Weep freely, friends, but let your tears be those of expectant Christians, not hopeless pagans. Let us look at the story. The Lord had all this time been trying to teach his friends about his Father, what a blessed and perfect Father he was, who had sent him that men might look on his very likeness, and know him greater than any likeness could show him. And all they had gained by it seemed not to amount to an atom of consolation when the touch of death came. He had said hundreds of things to Martha and Mary that are not down in the few pages of our earthly gospel. But the fact that God loves them and that God has Lazarus seems nothing to them because they have not Lazarus. The Lord himself, for all he has been to them, cannot console them, even with his bodily presence, for the bodily absence of their brother. I do not mean that God would have even his closest presence make us forget or cease to desire that of our friend. God forbid. The love of God is the perfecting of every love. He is not the God of oblivion, but of eternal remembrance. There is no past with him. So far is he from such jealousy as we have heard imputed to him. His determination is that his sons and daughters shall love each other perfectly. He gave us to each other to belong to each other forever. He does not give to take away. With him is no variableness or shadow of turning. But if my son or daughter be gone from me for a season, should not the coming of their mother comfort me? Is it nothing that he who is the life should be present, assuring the well-being of the life that is vanished, and the well-being of the love that misses it? Why should the Lord have come to the world at all, if these his friends were to make no more good of him than this? Having the elder brother, could they not do for a little while without the younger? Must they be absolutely miserable without him? All their cry was, Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. You may say they did not know Christ well enough yet. That is plain. But Christ had expected more of them and was disappointed. You may say, how could that be, seeing he knew what was in man? I doubt, if you think rightly, how much the Lord gave up in coming to us. Perhaps you have a poor idea of how much the Son was able to part with, or rather could let the Father take from him, without his sonship, the eternal to the eternal, being touched by it, save to show it deeper and deeper, closer and closer. That he did not in this world know everything is plain from his words, and from signs as well. I should scorn to imagine that ignorance touching his Godhead, that his Godhead could be hurt by what enhances his devotion. It enhances in my eyes the idea of his Godhead. Here, I repeat, I cannot but think he was disappointed with his friends, Martha and Mary. Had he done no more for them than this? Was his Father and their Father no comfort to them? Was this the way his best friends treated his Father, who was doing everything for them possible for a father to do for his children? He cared so dearly for their hearts that he could not endure to see them weeping so that they shut out his Father. His love was vexed with them that they would sit in ashes when they ought to be out in his Father's sun and wind. And all for a lie. Seeing the feeling in their hearts that made them so weep was a false one. Remember, it was not their love, but a false notion of loss. Were they no nearer the light of life than that? To think they should believe in death in the grave, not in him, the life. Why should death trouble them? Why grudge the friendly elements their grasp on the body, restoring it whence it came, because Lazarus was gone home to God and needed it no more? I suspect that, looking into their hearts, he saw them feeling and acting just as if Lazarus had ceased to exist. Lord, if thou hadst been here, my brother had not died. But I know that even now, whatsoever thou wilt ask of God, God will give it to thee. Thy brother shall rise again. I know that he shall rise again in the resurrection at the last day. I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. And whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. I will not now endeavor to disclose anything of the depth of this word of the Lord. It will suffice for my present object to say that the sisters must surely have known that he raised up the daughter of Jairus and the son of the widow of Nain. And if the words he had just spoken, "Thy brother shall rise again," seemed to Martha too good to be true in the sense that he was going to raise him now, both she and Mary, believing he could raise him if he would, might at least have known that if he did not, it must be for reasons as lovely as any for which he might have done it. If he could and did not, must it not be as well as, yes, better than if he did? Martha had gone away, for the moment at least, a little comforted, and now came Mary, who knew the Lord better than her sister. Alas, with the same bitter tears flowing from her eyes, and the same hopeless words, almost of reproach, falling from her lips. Then it was, at the sight of her and the Jews weeping with her, that the Spirit of the Lord was moved with indignation. They wept as those who believe in death, not in life. Mary wept as if she had never seen with her eyes, never handled with her hands the word of life. He was troubled with their unbelief, and troubled with their trouble. What was to be done with his brothers and sisters who would be miserable, who would not believe in his Father? What a life of pain was theirs! How was he to comfort them? They would not be comforted. What a world was it that would go on thus, that would not free itself from the clutch of death even after death was dead, but would weep and weep for thousands of years to come, clasped to the bosom of dead death? Was existence, the glorious outgift of his Father, to be the most terrible of miseries because some must go home before others? It was all so sad, and all because they would not know his Father. Then came the reaction from his indignation, and the laboring heart of the Lord found relief in tears. The Lord was standing, as it were, on the watershed of life. On one side of him lay what Martha and Mary called the world of life. On the other, what he and his Father and Lazarus called more abundant life. The Lord saw into both worlds, saw Martha and Mary on the one side weeping, on the other Lazarus waiting for them in peace. He would do his best for them, for the sisters, not for Lazarus. It was hard on Lazarus to be called back into the winding sheet of the body, a sacrifice to their faithlessness, but it should be done. Lazarus should suffer for his sisters. Through him they should be compelled to believe in the Father and so be delivered from bondage. Death should have no more dominion over them. He was vexed with them, I have said, for not believing in God, his and their Father, and at the same time was troubled with their trouble. The cloud of his loving anger and disappointed sympathy broke in tears, and the tears eased his heart of the weight of its divine grief. He turned not to them, not to punish them for their unbelief, not even to chide them for their sorrow. He turned to his Father to thank him. Jesus thanks his Father for hearing a prayer he had made. Whether a moment before or ere he left the other side of the Jordan, I cannot tell. What was the prayer for having heard which he now thanks his Father? Surely he had spoken about bringing Lazarus back, and his Father had shown himself of one mind with him. And I knew that thou hearest me always, but because of the multitude which standeth around I said it, that they may believe that thou didst send me. I said it. Said what? He had said something for the sake of the multitude. What was it? The thanksgiving he had just uttered. He was not in the way of thanking his Father in formal words, and now would not naturally have spoken his thanks aloud. For he was always speaking to the Father, and the Father was always hearing him. But he had a reason for doing so, and was now going to give his reason. He had done the unusual thing for the sake of being heard to do it, and for holy honesty's sake he tells the fact, speaking to his Father, so as the people about him may hear, and there be no shadow of undisclosed doubleness in the action, nothing covert, however perfect in honesty. His design in thus thinking aloud must be made patent. I thank thee, Father, for hearing me, and I say it, not as if I had any doubt of thy hearing me, but that the people may understand that I am not doing this thing of myself, but as thy messenger. It is thou, Father, art going to do it. I am doing it as thy right hand. Lazarus, come forth! I have said the trouble of the Lord was that his friends would not trust his Father. He did not want any reception of himself that was not a reception of his Father. It was his Father, not he, that did the works. From this disappointment came, it seems to me, that sorrowful sigh. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? The thought of the Lord in uttering this prayer is not his own justification, but his Father's reception by his children. If ever the Lord claims to be received as a true man, it is for the sake of his Father and his brethren, that in the receiving of Christ, the Father may be received who sent Christ. Had Christ now desired the justification of his own claim, the thing he was about to do would have been powerful to that end. But he must have them understand clearly that the Father was one with him in it, that they were doing it together, that it was the will of the Father, that the Father had sent him. Lazarus must come and help him with these sisters whom he could not get to believe. Lazarus had tasted of death and knew what it was. He must come and give his testimony. They have lost sight of you, Lazarus, and fancy you gone to the nowhere of their unbelief. Come forth, come out of the unseen, we will set them at rest. It was hard, I repeat, upon Lazarus. He was better where he was. But he must come and bear the Lord company a little longer, and then be left behind with his sisters, that they and millions more like them might know that God is the God of the living and not of the dead. The Jews said, "Behold how he loved him." But can any Christian believe it was from love to Lazarus that Jesus wept? It was from love to God and to Martha and Mary. He had not lost Lazarus, but Martha and Mary were astray from their Father in heaven. "Come, my brother, witness," he cried. And Lazarus came forth, bound hand and foot. "Loose him and let him go," he said, a live truth walking about the world. He had never been dead, and was come forth. He had not been lost, and was restored. It was a strange door he came through, back to his own, a door seldom used, known only to one. But there he was. Oh, the hearts of Martha and Mary! Surely the Lord had some recompense for his trouble, beholding their joy.